Hello everybody and welcome to today's presentation where we'll be talking about getting ready for the workplace as a new graduate physiotherapist.
I'm Jim Farhi, I'm one of the Assistant Directors of the Employment Relations and Union Services, and with me...
I'm Jill Rawlinson and I'm one of the Assistant Directors in Practice and Development, part of the CSP, and I have a lead for Education and Workforce.
This presentation is normally delivered by one of our senior negotiating officers at the university or the higher education institute, but because of the current lockdown, we've decided to do this a slightly different way, and we're hoping that some of this will provide students with useful information, how to apply and what to think about in your first job.
I'm sure by now you're already very familiar with the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. It's the only professional, educational and trade union body for physiotherapists in the United Kingdom, and we have about over 59,000 members. So the CSP supports all of those members with professional advice, legal advice, and supports them through their careers, and is really responsible as well for championing physiotherapy, both to physiotherapists themselves but also to the wider public.
And the more physiotherapists that we have and also associates that we have within the CSP, then the stronger voice we have for physiotherapy within the health sector, and that is massively important.
Especially just thinking, Jim, when we're talking about lobbying and pressure and the work, for example, we've been doing during COVID, so really important that we've got those numbers to be able to exert that influence.
If we move on to the Health and Care Professions Council, this is the body that regulates physiotherapists and enables you to work. You have to pay a fee every year to the HCPC in order to practice. HCPC is massively important. They set the standards for professionals around education, training, and also practice. You are placed and you pay to be placed on a register of professional physiotherapists who meet those standards. And if for any reason a complaint goes in, or you fall short of those standards, the HCPC is the individual group that may take action against you as your regulator.
So we're going to talk about renewals. So every 2 years, the HCPC asks all different parts of the register, and as physiotherapists, you would be on the physiotherapy register. So all registrants were asked to sign to say that they still meet all the standards and that they've maintained their competency and undertaken CPD. And a random 2.5% sample of those physios received a letter asking them to demonstrate that CPD in the form of a portfolio. And there's very specific guidance about what they're specifically asking for. What's really important is from the moment you are practicing, just as you have been doing whilst you're a student, it's about maintaining a record of your continuing professional development in whatever way that's helpful for you, but many of you will have used portfolios, and the CSP e-portfolio might be something you're familiar with or might be something you want to use as a registrant to support that evidence for your CPD, because if you are one of the randomly selected group in the next round of audit in 2 years' time, then that will really put you ahead of the game, that you've got a lot of that recorded already to pull together in the way that the HCPC will ask for that to be done. So really can't stress enough the importance of the HCPC. It's your responsibility as a registrant to demonstrate that you meet and maintain the meeting of those standards, because remember, the HCPC is there to protect the public, and it's absolutely essential for all of us as registrants that we ensure our peers and our physiotherapy profession maintains those really high standards.
Thank you, Jill. So in relation to insurance, the HCPC does require all physios to have appropriate indemnity insurance, and you will have to say that when you're re-registering with them. Now, if you are employed, quite often members rightly think I've got vicarious liability insurance. What you won't have from your employer is insurance if you go and undertake some work privately, if you do something in the evenings, if you give advice outside of work that's not collected to that, or if you go off and you undertake work at a local sports club during the week. All of this is private practice, and you must have insurance if you undertake any of that. So the most simple way to undertake that liability from the HCPC is CSP membership. If you look at taking out private liability or professional liability insurance privately, this will cost you over £300 in the current rate. That is exceptionally close to currently what the CSP membership is. And when you look at all the added benefits that you get from that, really it's a no-brainer. What you get from the CSP is medical malpractice insurance. That will cover you for claims of personal injury to your patients, but you also get public liability insurance. And that covers you for non-personal injury claims, which are not associated with your treatments. So insurance, PLI, massively important to you. It must be something that you think about, and it's something, as I say, you must say to the HCPC, yes, I am covered.
The point that you make there about private practice isn't just when you're sort of formally thinking about being employed by somebody or very sort of specifically seeing patients or clients that are paying. You know, that conversation with a friend in the pub, or that sort of quick photograph that somebody sends or video of their injury that you're giving advice over as a friend, is absolutely still private practice. And that's why having that PLI insurance is so important, because you often don't think that's going to lead to anything, but you absolutely need to be covered for every bit of advice that you're giving, including friends and family.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I could follow on from there is supporting a CSP member who was at the HCPC who had provided simple advice to his partner. Years down the line, that had broken down, that partnership. And their ex-partner actually brought a case against them for the advice that they provided to them whilst they were together. So you make an absolutely valid point there. So if we carry on about the HCPC and its role, the HCPC is, as we've already said, it's your regulatory body. It's not a membership organisation. You have to be registered in order to practice. Its functions are to protect the public and to uphold public confidence in the profession. It is there for the public protection, not for yours. And as a regulator, it will investigate any complaints that come in about you, whether that be from a patient, patient's family, other professionals, your employer, or anybody else. And those complaints can be made in person, or they can be made anonymously. If you get a HCPC complaint and you're employed, let me say this to you now, your employer will not support you. They will not advise you. They will not represent you. The HCPC complaint process is about you as an individual professional. Therefore, it's down to you to seek your support, advice, and to provide information back to the HCPC. If you're a member of the CSP, we do that through solicitors and potentially through barristers on your behalf. If you're not a member of the HCPC, you will have to seek your own legal opinion, advice, and support, and pay for that. If you do end up at a HCPC hearing, it's exceptionally similar to sitting in a court case. The HCPC take advice and statements through a solicitor. And if you're at a hearing, that evidence is provided by a barrister. This is why it's so important for you to think, if I end up there, what am I going to be doing and how can I support myself in the future? Because this is your entire livelihood on the line. If you're a CSP member, we fully support you. We have an in-house solicitor. We also have access to solicitors outside the CSP, specialists in their field for trade unions. The average cost of funding a HCPC response lies between £3,000 and £5,000, depending on a hearing. And if you think it's just bad physios or incompetent physios that need to be concerned, I would urge you, think again. It might be a patient or a family member has unrealistic expectations and therefore make a complaint against you. One of the most common complaints we get are male physios working in private practice, particularly alone. They are very, very vulnerable to complaints of sexual misconduct, particularly if rehabilitation or treatment hasn't gone to plan.
And it is that thing, isn't it, Jim, that it's not just people, you think, oh, well, I'm a good physio, so I'll be okay. It is really, there's a lot of other factors that are not always within your control that you need to be protected against as well. And that really does, that comes really nicely onto our next slide, which is about professionalism. And it's important, I'm sure you're already familiar, but if you're not familiar with the CSP's Code of Professional Values and Behaviour, absolutely imperative that you read that, so you're really clear on what are the standards that the CSP are expecting of our members. And you've been working, as I say, towards developing your professionalism skills, and you will have been displaying those in both your academic and your clinical practice, and many of your assessments, particularly around clinical placement, are likely to have been assessed against these standards. So you're absolutely capable, and you know you've been being developed, and those professional standards are there. But as you move into the world of being a registrant, it's important that you really take on that professional responsibility, and do think about the way you conduct yourself, not just in a one-to-one interaction with the service user, but also with your colleagues. And that could be in person, but also on social media, in conferences, whether they're online or in person. You are a professional 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And personally, my rule of thumb is never write something on Twitter, never write something on Facebook or Instagram that you wouldn't say in a professional forum, face-to-face with either patients, service users, or colleagues. So being a professional is absolutely key, and that's a key part of the CSP's role, is really upholding those professional standards alongside the HCPC. We're going to move on to finding work. I'm sure you're all eagerly anticipating getting that first paycheck and getting out there into the world of work. And I'm sure you've, even despite these really unusual times, been thinking about jobs. Many of you will have already had job offers, perhaps. Some will be still looking and deciding, maybe whilst you're focusing on finishing your studies. So there's lots of different places that jobs will be advertised. You'll see the CSP website. There's the NHS jobs website. You can register to receive alerts for those jobs that come up that fit your criteria. And we do actually publish some job adverts in the Frontline magazine as well. You'll obviously also be in connection and contact with your local trust. You might have a preferred organisation that you would like to work for. That might be NHS, it might be a private or independent provider, it might be a charity or another sector. So being online, checking Twitter accounts, LinkedIn is a really key platform as well for looking out for jobs, and really being proactive in making those contacts, following up. Perhaps if you send an email and you've not heard, remember taking on the relationships you've made through successful clinical placements. Those relationships are really key. They've had experience of you working as a student physiotherapist, and they're likely to have really got a feel for how you've integrated into that setting, your level of commitment, in enthusiasm, professionalism, etc. So really capitalize on those opportunities, because I think, you know, it's often a no-brainer for an organization to take someone on that they've really got to know very well, that really fits their organization. And do make sure you keep all your details up to date. So particularly when you're moving from being a student, you often move address, your details may change. Make sure you're keeping your details up to date with all of those, including the CSP, because it's really important that we can get hold of you. When you do that, I actually made a terrible error when I moved house in not keeping up to date, and I actually missed the renewal. And I was a university lecturer at the time, and I had to be a HCPC employee, and I had to take a week's unpaid leave whilst they reprocessed me rejoining the HCPC, because I hadn't signed my renewal because I'd missed the letter in the post because it went to my old address. So I actually lost a whole week's wages because of that and wasn't able to work. So please let that be a lesson to anyone, and the dreaded moving house, and making sure you've kept up to date with all your contact details.
So you've been offered a job. Fantastic. Now, things that you need to make sure is that you actually read through and check and understand the information that you've been given. Please read your contract of employment. It's massively important. It's going to give you all the details of the terms and conditions that you are contracted on. Now, if you are signing a contract with a private employer, there might be something on there called a deed of covenant. This is one of the things that people frequently come and ask the CSP when they're looking at leaving an employer. And a deed of covenant is something that restricts your ability to practice for a period of time when you leave somebody. It might be a geographical location. It might be undertaking physiotherapy for a certain amount of time with their similar clients. If you're not happy with that deed of covenant, make sure you challenge that before you sign and agree your contract. Because after the event, there's nothing you can do about it. So please read, understand, seek clarification if you need it. If you've had a conversation with your employer about any aspects of your contract and they agree, or you mutually agree any terms, so flexible working, or they might look at taking a clause out, get that in writing, have the contract changed. If you think, I'm just going to attend work but not sign my contract, a common assumption there is that you can't be held to account for it, but actually you can. You've been offered your terms and conditions by attending work and being paid. That is classed as accepting your contract of employment as it was offered. So don't think that not signing a contract is going to support your point of view later down the way. It won't. Obviously, the thing that you really want is a permanent job, one that isn't fixed term or on a temporary rolling basis. They are the most desirable option. But in the current climate, you might think, actually, I'm going to go for a temporary role or a fixed term one. 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. You may work in the NHS, it may be outside of the NHS. So it might be things like palliative care. Providing you know exactly what you're signing up with and you're comfortable with that, that's absolutely fine. Do remember that your job contract is a legally binding agreement. It's a contract under law. And you will get a written statement of particulars which is mandatory. And within that, some of the things are about pay, terms and conditions. And if we just move on to look at the statement of terms, the things that must be in there is how much pay you're going to get, How many hours are you working for? Is it full-time or part-time? Look out for clauses there that talk about overtime. Look at your hours of work and see, are they fixed? So if you're in the NHS and you're full-time, it'll be 37.5 hours. If you're working for a different employer, it may say hours up to and in advance of 40, or hours up to and above 35. Is overtime compulsory, or is it voluntary? It will provide you information about your holiday entitlement, where you work, where your base is, and what policies and procedures that you are covered under. It will tell you your date of employment and what your continuous employment is. These are all really important things to take on board.
So Jim talked about fixed term contracts there, and I think I would really reiterate Jim's point that, you know, a permanent employed position is perhaps the most desirable, and but in some situations fixed term contracts might be really attractive, and they might also be sort of suited to the situation, for example during the coronavirus pandemic that we've got. So I think it's really important to say that you, as a fixed term worker, have the same rights as to PPE, to, you know, all the benefits as a permanent position, but it's your employment period is for a defined time that you have agreed to. And there are benefits that are accrued if you're there for a long time. Once you've been there sort of over 2 years, you do start to gain rights that make you more parity with a permanent position. So just important that if you do stay in fixed term contracts that are constantly extended, just to be really clear on your rights that you accrue during your time there. And Jim might want to add a little bit more there as ERIS expert.
Length of time that you're at an employer is massively important in relation to things that relate to redundancy pay. Because what you don't do when you initially start a job is have full employment rights. In that, you're not entitled to things like redundancy pay, because these are earned over the first 2 years of your work. Once you've been at an employer past 2 years, you've got these other aspects that are added in to protect you. So if we look at NHS terms and conditions, these were all harmonised way back in 2004, and if you join the NHS, you'll join it under the Agenda for Change terms and conditions of employment. So this is just a national agreement across all 4 countries. Now, even when I say it's a national agreement across all 4 countries, it's slightly different across the 4 countries because some of these aspects are devolved. So wherever you're getting a job, you want to just check what they are for the country that you're in. The terms and conditions refer to all sorts of aspects of working life, like pay, holidays, your hours of work, annual leave, maternity leave, all of these sorts of aspects. Within the NHS, it consists of 8 pay bands. It used to consist of 9, but band 1 has been disbanded in a recent pay deal. And all of these tend to be covered by Agenda for Change pay rates. And when you get a job in the NHS, you will start as a newly qualified member of staff or a qualified physiotherapist at band 5. Now the pay rates for that will slightly vary from country to country. So whichever country you're in, check your pay rate. At the moment, you'll be looking around about £25,000 to start. It's a little bit less in England. It's a little bit more in Scotland. In relation to private practice, what you tend to find is what happens in the NHS is very closely reflected in private practice. So the pay rates for private practice are not set. It's down to individual employers to set those. So if you're deciding to move into the private practice field, it's worth looking at what the NHS fees are and the salary scale is, and having that conversation as you start a new job. So the terms and conditions in Agenda for Change encompass many things such as on-call payments, sickness, maternity leave, your pension and appraisal. When you look at these on-call payments, that is something that is locally agreed. So each individual trust or health board will agree those locally. So they may vary to something that your colleague who lives 40, 50 miles away is being paid for a similar role. Your standard working week, as we've already said, is 37.5 hours. You may find that is spread over 7 days. This is increasingly becoming the norm. You gradually build up things like sick pay right the way through to when you have a policy of 6 months full pay and 6 months half pay. There are aspects around maternity leave, parental leave, and paternity leave in place, which are nationally agreed. And the CSP has many briefing papers on all of those aspects to assist you. And if you've got questions locally when you've started, then you'll have a CSP steward that you can always ask those questions to. There is a defined benefit pension scheme in the NHS. Now, that is one of the better schemes because what you pay in and what you get out is a set amount. That's why it's a defined benefit. We would say you automatically get enrolled into that. If you're thinking of opting out, go and seek independent financial advice on it. CSP cannot advise you, your local steward cannot advise you. You must go and see an expert for pension advice. If you're working in one of the larger areas, suburban areas, there are things called high cost area supplements. And this is particularly around London. So if you're in inner London, you will have an increase in your salary, which is a percentage or a set amount. If you're in outer London, again, slightly lower percentage, slightly lower set amount. And there's also extra money if you live on the fringes of London.
There is a framework or mechanism around appraisal. So obviously when you take up employment, you are entitled to and should be receiving a regular appraisal where you sit down with your line manager, discussing your needs, your own personal development needs and professional development needs whilst working for that organisation. And there should be a really clear commitment to supporting you to achieve those objectives. You will need to have regular meetings and there are some pay points on the Agenda for Change based with the Knowledge and Skills Framework, the KSF, that will require you, as you increase your salary year on year as part of the pay banding, there are a couple of gateways at the top and bottom of the band which will require you to be able to have that conversation and demonstrate that you meet the necessary behaviours, skills, knowledge in terms to go through those gateways. So really important to familiarise yourself with the KSF, the Knowledge and Skills Framework, if it's something you're not perhaps familiar with.
So if we move on to points of progression in pay, we've already said that you would start up as a Band 5 physiotherapist. There used to be about 8 or 9 pay points on the old Band 5 scale, so it would take you that long to get from the bottom of the pay scale to the top of the pay scale. Recently, with the pay deal, the 3-year pay deal that was done in 2017, what we've managed to do is reduce that time scale. And this is a pictorial evidence of that. And if we look at the Band 5, then you would start at the base of the pay scale. After 2 years, providing meeting all of your knowledge, skills and experience and your appraisals are good, you move up to an intermediate point, which is shown as point 2 and starred on this. And then you stay on that for another 2 years. And again, providing you're meeting the standards of your organisation, in 2 years, you move to the top of that pay scale. So overall, to get from the bottom to the top of the pay scale at band 5, it's a journey of 4 years. And it's 2 steps. A lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot simpler. And you can see a similar route through the different bands. So as you move from band 5 into band 6 and band 6 onwards to band 7, it's the same journey. When you get promoted, you will always start at the bottom of the band. The only exception to some of those aspects about moving forwards is those at the very, very top of band 8, A, B, C, D, and band 9, where that final step can be 10% of that, I believe, is re-earnable. So what you have to do and you have to show is that you're still meeting your knowledge, your skills, your experience, and you're meeting your appraisal processes. If you fail to do that at those levels, 10% of your pay may be taken away. So some of it is classed as performance-related pay. But all of these aspects would be set out in your contract of employment.
Okay, so let's move on to being a member of the CSP and what that actually provides for us. So, I mean, there's a huge list of benefits of being a member of the CSP. I mean, for me, when I graduated as a physiotherapist, it was a sort of, it was just something that I'd worked for 3 years. I'd wanted to be a physiotherapist for a long time. So it was an absolute no-brainer that you would want to be part of a huge network, if you like, other physiotherapists. Being part of that professional body means that you're kept up to date with what's going on. You can be part of something bigger that helps shape your profession, help, whether that's through being a very active member, through campaigning and lobbying, being part of local networks or groups, or perhaps if you're not one of those people that wants to, you know, be take a committee position, still being very connected through perhaps Frontline, through the website, and really have opportunities to keep up to date. So for me, yes, there's lots of specific benefits. Of course, really key things like professional advice and support. We have many professional advisors work within the CSP who are really experienced physiotherapists from across the sectors, who are there to answer with the inquiries team any specific professional inquiries you've got about your working life. We've also got the employment advice and support, which is offered in assistance through the Stewards Network. And there's lots of, and you've got, of course, your legal representation, which we talked about, your PLI insurance. So they're absolutely essential parts of protecting yourself as an individual, as we've already talked about. But I think there's that really much wider benefit of being part of the professional body. Over 59,000, we're growing as a profession and we're growing as a membership. So that really gives us a huge opportunity to exert our influence as well. A lot of what goes on in the CSP, and I'll give you this example because I only joined the CSP as an employee 6 months ago, but I've been a member for nearly 20 years. And I'm really blown away by how much behind the scenes pressure, lobbying to high level government across the 4 countries goes on. And we've seen that as well during the coronavirus. So I think it's about getting those benefits of, yes, there's the CPD tool, there's the virtual learning environment, there's the e-portfolio. Another really important membership benefit is, of course, you get access to the discovery databases. So once you lose your access through your university to journals and those databases to search for the literature and evidence that underpins practice, you could still do that through your discovery. And that's really, really important membership benefit. And there's lots of those examples. And we'll talk a little bit about the other benefit, which is being part of the networks a little bit later on.
So if we move on to the local CSP, there is a local CSP team in most employers that you go to, and that will be a CSP steward, a health and safety rep, and a workplace contact. But if we talk a little bit about CSP stewards give you the direct link between your employer and the CSP. So you as a member, the employer, and ourselves at Bedford Row. And the stewards are there to provide you with advice and support locally on issues that you have, whether that be something about your employment, whether that be about how policies are working, whether that's about a national term and condition. They will represent you and support you locally if you're having issues, and they can raise issues on your behalf, whether it's your own or about your working environment. They will be involved with negotiating with management about things that affect your employment locally. So if there's local terms and conditions that are devolved from a national level, it's your steward that would be working on those with other stewards from other unions in your employer. They're a vital link between the CSP and our members because they keep us up to date and they keep you up to date. They tell us what's going on the ground, and they help us to direct where we need to put and focus our resources as the CSP. They will support you locally to challenge management on things that actually will make your life better and easier. They gather views, and again, as I say, they feed those back to us. So if you go into a workplace and you don't have one, I would say raise it. Raise the fact you haven't got a local steward. Think about volunteering for that role and get yourself elected. All of our local reps are supported by a senior negotiating officer who works regionally and covers many different employers, whether that be private or NHS. Similar thing with our safety reps. Again, our safety reps will support you in your workplace, and they advise and represent on matters that relate to health and safety and well-being at work. They hold employers to account around their legal obligations to you and things that support your health and safety. And at the moment, this is so key. So within the current environment of coronavirus, what we're finding is that safety reps and stewards are coming together in workplaces to support members to ensure that they have access to and provision of appropriate PPE, and that the right things are being done by employers at the right times to support your health and well-being. Our safety reps are picking up on things like a lack of fit testing for higher level PPE at the moment. And we are then we're able to challenge locally and nationally to make the changes to ensure that our members are working safely. And we've been successful with that. But it's only because we have people locally who can raise those issues on your behalf. And the other part of the team that's there is your CSP workplace contact. So your workplace contact is somebody who doesn't really want to take a formal role. It's not something that with any time off, it's not protected under law, but it is literally somebody who can pass on information and be a link in a workplace. So it's somebody who volunteers to do some work with the steward or with the safety rep and be that link. We know that many employers are spread over massive geographical areas. I know that when I used to work in Kent, we had 52 different bases to try and cover. And when I was a steward, we had 3 stewards and we had a couple of safety reps. I would have loved to have workplace contacts in 10, 15 of those places to pass information on to our members, but also to pass members' views and thoughts back to me. Again, all of these roles are absolutely voluntary. The workplace contact is one that is self-elected. The steward and the health and safety rep, members, you, the members, elect these individuals. It's absolutely simple to sign up. You do that online, and you can support us to help every single member that is out there. If we just look very quickly at employment rights, these are so important when you're dealing with absolutely anything. But you've got rights in relation to being consulted with for changes of your work. Doesn't matter where you work, you should be consulted with. If you're going to be moving your employer on a TUPE transfer, you have rights to be consulted with prior to that happening. We need to look at aspects around discrimination in cases of inequality within a workplace. Our stewards and our safety reps will support you with those locally. If somebody is looking at changing your working hours or where you're working from, again, your rights are to be consulted and for that movement and change to be agreed. And it's not just about work, but it's about your personal circumstances at home. That can be very difficult for one person to walk into a room and have that conversation with management. Our stewards can support you in putting your arguments across and act like a buffer. And if we move on to around the CSP organising and campaigning, we've got a variety of different aspects up here. We've got love activity, hate exercise. We've got something called no physio, no way, and something there called pinpoint the pressure. These are all things that have been coming from members. We want more exercise. We want people to be supported, to be healthier. And it also links into what we at the CSP feel is one of our key objectives, keeping people healthy and enabling and supporting. The No Physio, No Way was a campaign that we've held in a couple of different places now. And it came because members said, locally, we're about to lose physiotherapy services. So one of these was about a reduction of access to physiotherapy, cutting physiotherapy for things like hip replacements and the rehabilitation of people post hip and knee replacements. And that was flagged by members to a steward. The steward flagged it to us, and a regional team locally then started to take that campaign forward. It was built from the ground upwards. And what we were able to do was to support members to influence locally and to challenge the recommendations that were being put forward through a local CCG. Those challenges on each aspect that we've used this were successful. And because of the pressure and the evidence base that we could put forward at a local level and local members campaigning, that made changes for patients that enabled them to get access to the services that they required. That is powerful campaigning by CSP members being supported by the CSP. And the Pinpoint the Pressure campaign, that's something that's constantly ongoing. Because if there are issues at work, what we look at is what those issues are. And they're supported either by your local steward or your health and safety rep. And it allows members to really pinpoint what the concerns are and what the top 3 issues or the top 4 issues of those are. And because again, that's members putting those concerns forward, the physios locally say what the problems actually are, and they can also put forward solutions, and your local steward or health and safety rep will take those forward to management on your behalf. Some of the things that we've seen through that process has actually been an increase locally of physiotherapists to be able to support their patients. Some of it has been about an increase in admin staff to support physios undertaking their work. Some of it has been about changing ways of working. Some of it has been about the environment that you're working in and making improvements from a health and safety point of view. So all these campaigns and local organising activities are so important to our members.
I'm sure during your programme you've been thinking about things like leadership and the role of healthcare professionals, including physiotherapists, in leading change, perhaps looking at very small service improvements you might have done as part of modules or or seen as part of your clinical placement. And I really think it's a great opportunity to really flag to you what are great opportunities that you have ahead of you now. You might think, you know, leadership is about being a manager and waiting until you're leading a physiotherapy team or a department. But I want to really emphasize that you can demonstrate those leadership skills now, and through some of the mechanisms Jim's talked about becoming a steward or a safety rep in the workplace could be the way that you might want to exhibit those leadership skills. You might want to join the professional networks. You might have a key interest in a specific area of physiotherapy, so joining one of the many professional networks. Many of them take student members, but obviously as you transition to becoming a chartered physiotherapist, then you can become a full member. And that really keeps you connected with very specialist branches of physiotherapy. We also, you might want to take part in demonstrating that leadership, perhaps through interactions on the interactive CSP network, an online forum where you can pose questions, you can get involved in discussions and debates. The other things you should think about are really from day one as becoming a new graduate, thinking about getting a mentor, somebody perhaps that you know from a previous placement. It might be somebody in your workplace, it might be somebody you know who's a little bit further ahead in their career, who can really offer you that support to think about where your career is going. I think at this stage, you're probably just at the point where you just want to become a graduate, you want to become a chartered physiotherapist, and then you can sort of think, phew, I'm done. And I think it's really just when you find some energy again, it's just starting to think about, right, where am I going? What do I want to achieve in the next year, even the next 3, 5, or maybe even 10 years? Where would I like to head in my career? Because there really are huge diversity and opportunities. If you were qualifying as a doctor now, you would be thinking about training programs, pathways, specialisms, working as a consultant in a hospital. You might want to work in primary care. And it's exactly the same for you as a physiotherapist qualifying now. There is huge opportunities available to you. And I think it's about not sort of forgetting that as you embark on your newly qualified journey. So do get involved with the networks. We have regional networks where some of these are particularly active, and if they're not, maybe they need a bit of reinvigoration. You might want to join and go along to their meetings, or start setting up some meetings that really meet the needs of the local members. So do get involved where you can with those forums. And if you have a look at CSP's council, they're all elected members, and there's different rounds of election onto the council. So there are huge opportunities to influence and shape your profession, and you can do that from now. You don't need to wait till you're, like I say, a manager or in a leadership role per se. And I think it's really great that we want our newly qualified members to really shape the profession, because you're the ones that are going to be really working over the next perhaps 40, 50 years in the profession. So there's a real opportunity to shape that.
And when we think about people that have undertaken some of the roles that we've mentioned, then we can look at our Chief Executive Officer. We can look at Karen Middleton and say, actually, she was a steward. I can look at the Head of Employment Relations and say, she was a steward. You can look at me and say, I was a steward.
Absolutely.
The leadership skills that are imparted by some of the training that you get in these positions is just, wow, grab it with both hands. It's unbelievable. So in relation to CSP membership, if you're a student member, then you can upgrade your CSP membership as soon as you've got your HCPC number. And full membership at the moment is just over £300 a year. Now that seems a lot, but what we spoke about earlier about PLI, I've already said to you it's going to cost you over £300 to get that privately. So actually, when you think about everything that you get from CSP membership, it's incredibly good money. The other thing that you can get with your membership is also tax relief. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you can take 20% off that bill. If you pay higher rate, 40% off that bill. If you go on to maternity leave, you can go on to managing your membership, you can contact us, and you can say, actually, I'm about to go onto maternity leave. Do I have to continue to pay at this level? No, you don't. You'll be non-practicing whilst you're on maternity leave. Therefore, reduce your payments down until you return into the workplace. If you are currently unemployed or you're on a very short-term contract of less than 4 months, actually you can pay £10 a month but still have all the benefits for a short period of time. Yes, you could go and join another union, you could join Unison, Unite, GMB, but what you won't get is all of the professional support, the professional advice, the level of PLI cover, and instant access to all of our briefing papers, and also all of our CPD offer. There's so much more that we offer you as your professional trade union and professional body.
Once you move on to the full registration, then of course you get that chartered status, and I think that's really important part of your journey to becoming a physiotherapist. You get in that badge that says that you are a chartered physiotherapist, and being able to use that title because you've gone through a program that has been accredited to the standards of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy and the HCPC, which is always really satisfying, and I still remember that, and I've still got my certificate on my office wall. I remember being really proud of that moment, being able to wear that badge and be able to call myself a chartered physiotherapist. But really the key messages for me are, as a physiotherapist and a member of the CSP for over 20 years, it's absolutely the best bit about being a physiotherapist is being part of that community of physiotherapy members and really being able to shape our profession. So I'd really urge you to get involved and take every opportunity being a CSP member brings.